Welcome back to One Winning Pod, where we are going into the season preview to talk about the Houston Texans with not a special guest, but with our third amigo, Chris, with us today. What's up, Chris? Welcome back.
Hey, glad to be back. It's been a couple weeks. I'm back. Peter, I've joined the club. Sleeping okay. Not that you guys have asked. I'm sleeping okay. That's why I'm here today. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Gosh, man, I'm not gonna lie. I considered waiting another week because this Houston Texans team I know very little about. Just been doing some research today, and I feel like going into it a little bit, the theme of the team, man, is just change and a lot of change. New quarterback, I'm sure some fans over there would be excited for, but a lot of unknowns for me. So it's going to be an interesting episode. I'm sure we're going to have a lot of different takes on this Houston team.
We didn't ask you because we can tell. I think we all know what sleep deprivation looks like. It does not look like Chris Rayborg on Labor Day 2023.
That's been the vibe I've gotten, because I've seen you twice now, and I'm like, this guy, you and Katie both, I'm just like, they seem like they're crushing it. I've never seen anyone like it. They're either putting on a real good act. I even asked Rachel, I'm like, am I crazy, or they seem like really fine? And she's like, yeah, they seem to be crushing it. I was like, yeah.
All right, well, the key is for me is sleep schedule is basically unchanged. I know, it's seriously, it's just he's been a really good kid. Sleep has been pretty good. Katie's been really nice, I guess, in taking nights and not really asking me to do too much during the night. As long as I get all of my accompanying chores done during the day, making sure there's enough bottles and cleaning dishes because she hates dishes. So as long as I do all that stuff, my nights are usually pretty good. But I can't speak for her because it's amazing. I don't know how she's doing so well, but
it's a rocker, dude.
I don't. Yeah, we can't really give them a shout out because they're not sponsoring us or anything. But there's a certain brand of rocker. It's a great choice. Recommend it to Alec, and it's a game changer. So if you guys are in the market for one, hit us up and we'll let you know what that is.
We procured ours. Yeah, it's on its way. So good times. All right, enough about that. But I think you're right, Chris. They got a new quarterback, and frankly, their whole passing offense is new. Yes, they have some returning young players, but as we'll see when we talk about it, a lot of the players are completely unproven, like total rookies, or they had their rookie season stolen from them. And I'm just like, this whole half of the ball game for them, throwing the ball, complete unknown. It's impossible. I feel like sometimes we go into these episodes being like, well, we don't know these teams as well. We haven't seen them as much, blah, blah, blah. This team, even if we had seen them a little bit this year, they're still so new and so much to gel. I think it's reasonable to be we're a little confused. So the fact that we have zero actual footage of them, it makes it even harder. This is the really hard, there's not any continuity really from last year.
Yeah, it's and even the guys who are knowns, because of where they've played in this league before, the vet guys that they've added on this team. Robert Woods, what is he post his injury? What is he outside of a Sean McVay offense? We saw him in Tennessee and he was terrible. Okay, all wide receivers are terrible in Tennessee, right? That doesn't really tell you anything you didn't know. Dalton Schultz, there was a lot of people who thought he was going to build on his 2021 season last year in Dallas. That didn't happen. Is he going to be just a guy there, or is he going to be this ultra target for a young quarterback? And young quarterbacks, as we know, really like to throw to the tight end. Can Schultz be that guy when he doesn't really have, a CeeDee Lamb or Brandon Cooks around him to kind of take some of the pressure off? There's there's so many unknowns. It's how can you give good analysis except just say that this is a young team that should probably get better as the season goes on. So really we're hitting them at the right time. But then at the same time, you don't want to overlook an opponent at any time as well. So this is a tricky one for our first preview of the year.
I did some listening to the Locked On Texans, and it was really difficult to listen to. I felt a little bad for him because it sounded like they had a lot of back of the roster decisions to make. And, we talked about assembling our 53, and while it was tough and there was a lot of guys we wanted to keep, it just sounded like to me they were still trying to figure out who their guard's going to be. Who's our starting guard? And we cut the guy we thought we were going to use. And I'm like, ooh, that's not good. And to add insult to injury, they had a bunch of injuries in the last preseason game. So they lost, they have 2 greens, which also made it really kind of tricky. But they lost Kenyon Green, their first rounder from last year, to injury. He's out for the year. Kendrick Green from the Steelers was out all last year and didn't play too well the year before, and now is going to play for them at some position. It also seemed confusing. They were like, maybe he'll be center, maybe he'll be guard. So I thought that was a little confusing. And yeah, they also lost their rookie Juice Scruggs to an injury. So what they tried to do was have a good offensive line. They still have some good pieces, but a lot of pieces fell apart. And now I think this is going to be an area where guys like Travis Jones could feast.
What's even more frustrating for the Texans is, I was doing my deep dive on the Texans this morning because, like everyone listening, I knew nothing about the Texans. And there's this article from ESPN. It's showing that the Texans going into this draft, they knew they were going to take a quarterback. They probably knew it was Stroud at that point. They probably knew that Carolina was taking Bryce Young. They wanted to avoid the mistakes that they had made with David Carr all the way back in 2002 and Deshaun Watson, which is basically feeding them to the wolves and having a subway turnstile as your offensive line. And they invested for this season $118 million in guaranteed money to the offensive line, which is the most that any team has done in an offseason since the Eagles 3 years ago. And yet we're looking at these players that they invested in. So Tunsil, they extended. Tunsil, he's healthy right now. He's obviously the key to their offensive line. Ravens fans remember Tunsil. He was the guy that we were expecting to draft in 2016, and then that video came out. Stanley was drafted. Who knows if we actually would have drafted Tunsil or not. We know that's long gone. Both players have had incredible careers in this league. But then, you're talking about Juice Scruggs. They traded with the Eagles to draft him, and then they went out and signed Shaq Mason from the Bucs. Now, he is still healthy. He's still healthy, so he should be playing. But then, they also went out and they extended their right tackle, Titus Howard. Now, could he come back soon? He could, but he's questionable for this game with a hand injury. They're hobbled, though, and what's really frustrating on their end is they did the thing that that everyone says, everyone criticizes these franchises who are going out and they're bottom feeders and they go and they get the star quarterback, and there's always the critique of you got the star quarterback, but you're destroying him with your offensive line. You're not protecting him. They went and they tried to do the good thing, the correct thing, and it might not work out just because of this huge bout of injuries that they're already experiencing here. Which just sucks for them.
Yeah, for sure. It's in some ways it's kind of like a worse situation. You mentioned about just kind of throwing all this money into the offensive line and not having a good outcome. It was almost like that, I think, with the first half of the Bengals last year, right? Is that they were having so many issues with their offensive line after spending so much money to acquire all these pieces. But fortunately for them, they were able to actually get some games under their belts and gel together, and everyone was healthy. So near the end of the season, you could see the dividends paying off. But for the Houston, just a sheer bout of dumb luck, really, of that they're not able to be healthy and playing together. So it's going to happen, right? I mean, the NFL is just unfortunately like that. I mean, as Ravens fans, we know that there are years that are just completely sapped due to injury. And, sometimes it happens. Sometimes you think you have the right moves and, everything looks good on paper, and then it doesn't turn out that way. So not their fault. I think that there still are reasons, I think, to be excited about this team, right? I think, one thing we didn't really talk about at the top, in addition to having C.J. Stroud as a rookie quarterback, they're also pairing him with a rookie head coach and D'Amico Ryan. So he was defensive coordinator coming over from the 49ers. Obviously, that was a very good defense over the last couple of years. Really wasn't that much of a drop-off, in my opinion, from Robert Saleh over to Ryan's, tenure as defensive coordinator. So, and, he's also a player. He played for Houston for like 8-9 years. So very familiar with the franchise and, was able to come back as a head coach. So, obviously, we've seen this many times before, first-time head coaches, they bring in the culture, they bring in the right culture, rather. You can have success even with guys who you might look at a roster, you're like, maybe, not the best group of guys. You bring in the right culture, you get people to buy in, I think, even through injuries and stuff, as long as you can kind of, keep the guys rallied and keep them focused, you can get some good outcomes even with the, players that you have. So kind of like what we said at the top, it's a big question mark. Obviously it doesn't look good for them, but on the other side with the Ravens, like they have a lot of question marks on the defensive line too. So I wouldn't say it's a automatic win for the Ravens right now.
The one thing that's kind of a constant is the running game, at least from last year. Dameon Pierce is still leading the group. They did also add Devin Singletary to, I think, spell him a decent amount. Mike Boone and Dario Ugawale, I don't think we're going to see much of them. But Pierce fought real hard runner, has a little bit of explosion, and I think he's a guy that, with a rookie quarterback, they're going to try to lean on as long as there isn't a runaway lead by the Ravens. So I do think if you're trying to game plan for them, obviously you always want to put up points, but I think that might be the best part of their offense at this point is the running game, and if we can kind of take that away by scoring a lot of points, that would be good.
Yeah, Pierce was one of the really cool stories last year from a perspective of a rookie coming into the NFL and doing well. One of the few bright spots for the Texans last year. There were a couple others, which we'll get to, that weren't as obvious, but Pierce really shown the most. Obviously with fantasy football being the thing that it is, Pierce was a guy who a lot of people were highlighting as a guy you could draft late round and be a strong running back for you, allow you to draft all your receivers early. And in a sense, he did kind of do that. There was a couple stretches there where he was out, but very strong year. I remember we were talking with Coach Evans prior to the draft that year, and he was talking about Pierce. I believe he said that he coached against him or something to that nature, and how he was just a monster there. And we were looking at his tape, and he looked like a guy who was going to come into this league. He had fresh legs. They really didn't run him a ton at Florida, and he did his thing his rookie year, and he should continue to build on that. Devin Singletary as their backup, I think, is interesting. It's really interesting that Singletary never took off. I remember his rookie year in Buffalo. We were saying that he looked pretty decent, like a guy who could be somewhat of a playmaker, and just never built on that. I'd have, maybe a change of scenery will do him good. Generally, a change of scenery into a team that's in year one of a rebuild doesn't usually do you good, but, we'll see. At least another guy back there who should get touches. But yeah, I imagine that the Texans are going to rely heavily on both of these guys, particularly out of the gates with Stroud. I did notice, if you watch C.J. Stroud's preseason tape, the Texans were running a lot of play action, a lot of boots. They're going to try and do that a lot, I have a feeling. Stroud, give him the help he can get with that. The running game's going to be there. That's going to be something they're going to try. We'll see how much they're able to do that, because this team is probably going to be playing from behind a lot. But when they can, I'm expecting they'll try and establish the run.
Yeah, cutting the field in half, giving simple reads to the quarterback is always a nice idea. I do fear that the Ravens' defense is going to be a little too much for that, though, with the quality of safety we have. Even if something looks open, it's not going to be open. By the way, I love the video. We should put it in the show notes. The video that K-Fish sent of the number one wide receiver for the Bengals. It was all these Ed Reed interceptions. Absolutely hilarious.
I actually haven't watched that yet.
It kind of reminds me. It kind of reminds me of what I just talked about. With the safeties like Roman and coming out of nowhere. Man, that guy was a highlight machine. The fact that there were so many awesome highlights just from Bengals games. Obviously, a division opponent, you play him twice a year, and there was a decent amount of them. But holy cow! It was a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah, a lot of interception returns on that video too. I could think of at least three of them, 4 of them, I think. Yeah, quite a bit. But yeah, I wanted to step back real quick for something. Talk about Devin Singletary. I actually wanted to say I really like that pickup by the Texans. I think I guess I would kind of agree with you, Peter. I think it just didn't really break out as the guy in Buffalo. Although I don't know, either they're just really bad at drafting running backs, or there's just something up with their scheme that they're just not able to have any guy. Because I mean, for years, like, you know, I feel like I've been playing fantasy to try and pick up like any of the Buffalo running backs, because if you have anybody with any success with Josh Allen, like, they're going to get tons of points, but they've never really kind of had a guy break out.
Do you have to go all the way back to McGahee? I'm trying to think.
Maybe.
Anyways, that's we're talking about Singletary, not that the Bills.
Yeah. Anyway, McGahee or the Skittles, Marshawn Lynch, Marshawn Lynch for the 1 year. Anyway, yeah, no, but Singletary, I always liked him. I mean, I think he had a pretty good yards per carry his rookie year. I mean, he played us really well. You know, had a lot of traits that we really liked. I remember talking about him that first year on our pod and in the recap episode. We thought he'd be a good player for him, but never really kind of broke out. I mean, I think his yards per carry were okay. Obviously, you know, Buffalo felt like they need to take it in a different direction. They ended up drafting Moss, and name's escaping the other guy that they drafted last year, who I also James Cook. But anyway, all that being said, I think, you know, he's a pass catching back. And I think that's probably the number one reason that they picked him up down in Houston is to take advantage of that. I mean, I think he could be a really good safety blanket for Stroud. I think pairing him with Stroud, I think was a great move. I think it could help him out a lot. Obviously, the matchup with the Ravens, I'm not sure if Singletary is a super favorable matchup. Obviously, we got Roquan, we've got Queen. They both have speed. I think they can be able to cover that kind of back. But I think overall throughout the season, I feel like Singletary's got to have a pretty significant impact on this offense, both to spell Pierce, but also to take advantage of those matchups on third down.
I think from a wide receiver's perspective, we kind of alluded to it at the top. Obviously, they have Bobby Trees, Robert Woods there. A guy that people are boosting a lot is Nico Collins. He showed some good advanced stats to suggest that he might be about to break out. And then, of course, they added, I would honestly say 3 people. They drafted last year Mechie, who then was diagnosed with the blood cancer and was out, but he's apparently back in. Tank Dell was drafted this year in the second round, which was nice, shifty and flashy guy that we saw in the preseason. And then Xavier Hutchinson, another guy that, like Matt Waldman, like for instance, more of a possession receiver. So they got 4 guys there that may be something, maybe nothing. And I'm curious to see the deployment of them, how they're going to use them, and then conversely, how the Ravens line up against them. What, personnel packages we bring out. And I'm also curious to see, who starts in corner for us. Like, I don't know if that's entirely clear.
Yeah, definitely. This might end up being a easy assignment for this makeshift secondary. Now, of course, I expect there to be some misalignment at times, some miscommunications in the secondary. Maybe there'll be an early timeout or something, just because I'm sure the Ravens coaches are making it up as they go, because of what happened with the injuries, getting all these guys in late. It's tough for the defensive coordinator there to figure out what they're going to do. But honestly, you look at this wide receiver room here, and it doesn't scare you from what you know. But like we're saying, one of these guys could break out. I mean, Tank Dell is a guy we know. Jason really liked his film. He liked him as a prospect. He looks like he could be someone as well. The other guys, though, you look at it, and I think Woods will be a good security blanket for Stroud on like short, intermediate throws, but he's not going to be a guy. He never was, even before the injury, a guy who was really a burner. He's more of a possession receiver with some speed. So at this stage in his career, I don't really know what you're getting. But Collins and Brown are interesting. I think they could make some noise. They had a disappointing preseason, from my understanding, from what I've read. And another problem that really happened a lot in the preseason with this group was drops. That was something that a lot of Texans beat writers pointed out, was that the stat lines that the quarterbacks had, like their completion percentage should have been a lot better, because they threw several catchable passes in those games that were just dropped by a multitude of these guys. So that's something that I'm sure the Texans coaches are going to want to have them cleaned up by by this game. I mean, that's kind of stating the obvious, but that is something that could hurt Stroud in his first game. You know, he's going to want some easy targets, some easy completions, and if these young guys aren't getting them for him, that things could unravel pretty quickly in that case.
Yeah, I think the number one thing for me in terms of kind of like a matchup here is finding a balance between the Ravens wanting to take advantage of Stroud's inexperience and, you know, taking some risks, particularly with like the safeties. I think Marcus Williams and Kyle Hamilton, like trying to figure out how they balance keeping the miscommunications down and keeping everybody on assignment, and then knowing when to break and, you know, making a play on the ball, and, you know, maybe trying to, you know, confuse Stroud with some alignment and stuff like that. Because yeah, I agree. Like if this wide receiver group were the Ravens, of course, I'm sure you'd have people be like, you know, like, oh yeah, there's like tons of potential here. But I look at the names, I'm just like, well, you know, I mean, yeah, sure, they're top 100, 200 wide receivers or something. Sure, they're names basically. They're just guys, but we have no idea. They're just potential at this point. So I mean, if you want a team of, you know, of Proches and Duvernays, I guess, like, sure. I mean, do that with what you will, I guess. So it doesn't really scare you from that perspective. So even though the Ravens don't have a ton of corners right now, and there's a lot of question marks on that side, it should be a matchup that, as long as they do their assignments and don't blow any coverages, you should be fine. And, you know, if I were the Ravens, I would take these sort of short completions all day, as long as you try to make a play on the ball, tackle the guy, limit the yak. As long as you do that, I think the Ravens would take that every single day. But as soon as you get caught looking for the ball and you're wrong, I think Stroud has the talent. I think some of these guys, like, you know, some of the receivers on their side, like, I'm sure that they can make plays, right? So you just can't put yourself in a position where you let those things up. Because certainly that, you know, you don't want to put the Ravens in a situation like that, even with the offense. I mean, we're excited about the offense, but, you know, getting down a touchdown, 2 touchdowns, like, the only thing we know from the Ravens is from the Greg Roman offense, and we know that playing from behind, in that offense at least, didn't really work out too well. So, you know, if I were the Ravens, try to keep this simple. You know, don't overlook the opponent. Just try not to take too many risks in that area, because I think that's one place where this game could just blow open really, really easy.
Yeah, I think that the Texans' path to victory, if they have one in this game, that the Ravens will have to make sure that they keep them out of, is if they control the time of possession. And there is a route where they could do that. You know, if Stroud gets in a groove, doing these long churning drives where you're throwing these short dinks to Woods and to Schultz that are connecting, and you're getting just enough out of Pierce. He's getting like 3-4 yards a carry, and they get these sustained drives and take the ball out of the Ravens' hands. And the Ravens, you know, with Lamar having his first action since November and first time running the Todd Monken offense in a prime situation, you know, real football. That, I think, is how the Texans could make this game close. I, again, don't want to be overconfident. I don't see a path for them winning in this game with rookie, you know, D'Amico Ryan's first game as a head coach. C.J. Stroud, I like some aspects of him. I think his accuracy is really good. Again, I think that's something that could help them, particularly against what will be our makeshift secondary. But, you know, that seems to be that'll be the path for them. You know, if they're able to get a ball control game where they've got the time of possession and they're making the offense simple for Stroud and Pierce, that's a slow burn. That's the route that they could make this game interesting.
Yeah, I was looking at it. So it's a 10-point favorites. The Ravens are implied score of 27-17, and it kind of puts what you said into perspective, Peter. I guess they do expect the Texans to somehow put together some scores, and the real way that they would be able to, I think, do that is if we got greedy, like you kind of said, Chris. Like, safeties are getting greedy; they want to get their picks, and then before you know it, like Tank Dell's behind him, and he's a quick guy. So I think that's the path for for them to try to win. And I think the big way kind of transition now to the defense of the Texans is for our new offense to, exploit them. But they have some good players. They do have some good players. And obviously with the new head coach that's defensive minded, you can see this group being pretty good.
Yeah, definitely. I guess to start out with, they have a guy on their defense that you drafted this year, Will Anderson, out of Alabama, right? He's out of Bama?
Yeah.
Who is expected to just be a physical freak at this level. 6'4", 243, just had a huge amount of sacks and tackles for loss at Alabama. So this will be his first NFL action, and it would not be unheard of for him to have, a good game. This is someone I think the offensive line is going to have to know where he is at all times and make sure that the coverage is there, or the protection, rather. He's a guy I think he should make a big splash. So he's the number one guy I'm looking at, even though he's just going to be a rookie playing his first game, that I think could disrupt these guys. I know he had a good game against Miami in the preseason, even in limited action, but outside of that, I'm not sure. But yeah, that guy is going to be a problem for the offensive line, even though it'll be his first game. That's how good this guy is.
Will Anderson was a player that Eric DeCoste even referenced in their pre-draft ceremony, the Liars Luncheon. They were like, yeah, if Will Anderson falls to us, I guess we just have to take him, kind of noting how good of a player he was. And the first player that came to mind to him as a person that would be ridiculous to fall down and be excellent. And the Texans definitely believe it too. They went up and traded to the 3rd overall pick after picking Stroud second. They traded their 12th round pick, their 33rd overall pick, and the first rounder for next year and a 3rd rounder for the year after. They also got a 4th rounder that year, but this year. But yeah, they threw a lot of draft assets to be able to go up and grab Will Anderson, who a lot of people think was, not only one of the top defensive players in this class, but a guy that would have been top of many classes for years. So he could be a real transcendent player for them. You get your hopeful quarterback of the future, your hopeful edge rusher of the future, and that's like a really good starting point for a franchise trying to rebuild.
It's definitely an interesting move because, just looking at their defense, I mean, obviously, Anderson being a really high pick. Stingley was their first-round selection from the previous year. He was also a very high pick. I think he was at top 5.
I think he was third.
He was third overall. He was third overall as well. Yeah.
Tied for the highest ever drafted for or ever selected for a cornerback.
Okay. Yeah. So I mean, obviously they have those two guys, but I'm looking through the rest of their roster and I'm like, my goodness, they're just a lot of names I don't recognize. And, obviously, the Texans have been also a, defensive franchise, since their founding. And, they've been able to kind of roll out some good defenses over the years. But it, to me, at least on the surface, like, seems like a really, really shallow defense overall. Just, a couple of star players. And then a couple of other guys that are kind of around it. We'll obviously see. I mean, I think D'Amico, again, going back to D'Amico Ryans, picking a defensive coach to be your head coach, that could help in the short term. Obviously, he knows what he's doing. He's, had a ton of success over in San Francisco, so, they can get those guys playing. But I just kind of wanted to bring it up just in terms of just the decision to go up and get Will Anderson. Hopefully he is that guy for them. That sort of transcendent player, because I feel like if he's anything less, that I feel like if hindsight was 2020, I'd look back at that and be like, well, I'd really like to have that draft capital from 2024 to be able to bolster this defense on some of these other positions.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that you reminded us that this Houston Texans team used to be such a stalwart with defense. And I think that might be part of why they brought D'Amico Ryans in, is maybe to get back to that identity, because really the past couple seasons, they just haven't been that, particularly rushing defense. I mean, last year, they were the worst rushing defense in the league. 2021, the 3rd worst. 2020, worst rushing defense in the league. 2019, they were a little better, but still in the bottom 10 in the league. It's been a little bit since this team, honestly, back with Ryan there, yeah, they were one of the best defensive teams in the league. And then that continued when they had Watt there. There were a lot of other really strong defensive players on those Texans defenses. A lot of names I'm forgetting just because, Houston Texans are honestly a team I care nothing about. But yeah, but the past few seasons, they really have not been that. And again, I think this is another thing that you put all that draft capital in with your quarterback. Everyone talks about, how you need to protect him with the offensive line and give him some people to throw to. Well, you also got to give him a defense that is going to make the game at least manageable, at least within a shot of winning. And right now, it does not seem like the Texans have that. Now, we'll see with the change in defensive coordinator, with Ryan coming in, if that'll help get them back in the right direction this season. But it still seems like a lot to ask of year one of this, and certainly a lot to ask out of the gate. Right, so I hear with what you're saying with Anderson. It is a gamble. But again, I think what we're talking about with how good of a prospect this guy is, the Texans see what they were able to do with building around J.J. Watt. I think that they want to try and do the same thing with Anderson. And Anderson, quite honestly, is a guy who his ceiling projects to be a J.J. Watt type player, maybe even better. That's how crazy his profile is. So. Yeah, I like the move. I think it is smart for them to try and build around him. If they drafted Stingley last year as well, we'll talk about Stingley because it's kind of interesting. But yeah, I agree. Outside of Stingley and Anderson, those are the big names. There's some other solid names here, but a lot of it is a lot of question marks. A lot of it are guys I had to look up. I did not know Malik Collins. I did not know Jonathan Greenwood. I did not know a lot of these guys. So this is definitely a defense in transition. From a culture that was once very proud on that side of the ball.
Yeah, I mean, the real test will be how much the Ravens offense is able to exploit this defense. I'm curious if Jalen Petrie is going to have himself a good game. He's a kind of an ascending player. And also, it seems as though Denzel Perryman, middle of their defense, middle linebacker, is a pretty good player. So with those pieces over the middle, you could see, we know that he loved to throw over the middle. In Roman's offense, we'll see how much more of the field is used in this new offense. And, I think it's a good first test. Obviously, you would love to have a test like this. Is about as favorable of a matchup as you could ask for. Maybe the Cardinals would have been better in week one. But, this is a pretty good matchup for this offense to start getting, its identity in place. And just looking also at their defensive line and all that, I actually could see J.K. Dobbins and crew running for a good amount of yards against this team.
Oh, I think you give everyone a shot. I think you give Dobbins some carries. I think you give Edwards some carries. I think you give Hill some carries. And honestly, I am questioning how much of the passing offense we're going to see in this game, just because of how abysmal the Texans' rushing defense has been the past 3 seasons. You're not fixing that in one off season. So even if they are going to be slightly better this year, I don't think it's going to be by much. So again, we talked about the Texans' path to victory. We might just see a big ball control game from us as well. Maybe not put that much of the new passing concepts on film. Wait for that against Cincinnati, or Cleveland. Maybe just not show your hand that much. It could be what they do. Well, it would be a little boring. It's just, it doesn't seem to me in most permutations that you could play this game that the Ravens will need to pass a ton to be successful against this defense, unless they just want to run up the score, which, again, you could make an argument for that, Lamar and the offense just getting ready and figuring out how these concepts work in a real game environment against an opponent that you should be able to do pretty well against. But even then, the Texans' pass defense last year was okay. Was that because their rush defense was just so bad, teams really didn't need to pass that much? I mean, kind of hard to tell. Derek Stingley, I said we'd circle back to him. He's really interesting because he was a big prospect last year. I know he was on our short board for guys we were interested in the Ravens getting. From what I'm seeing online, Texans fan base very lukewarm to this guy. I think a lot of it has to stem with how well of a season Sauce Gardner had on the Jets, and I think a lot of Texans fans said that during the draft they wanted Gardner over Stingley. So I don't know if is it how bad Stingley was, or is it just because Stingley wasn't Gardner, who had an amazing year, and a fine rookie season is still means you'll project fine can still mean that you'll project fine as a player, but of course pales in comparison if you got a guy over there who did that well. So that is I'm really interested in seeing. And then the rest of the secondary is really interesting. Desmond King was a veteran guy for this Texans defense for the past couple seasons, did well by all accounts, and the Texans cut him, and the Steelers picked him up, so we'll see him this year twice, presuming health. The rest of the guys you got here, Shaquille Griffin's been around the league for a while. Steven Nelson, this secondary, we'll have to see how good Stingley is, and then outside of that, I've got a lot of questions here. I'll admit that I don't know.
Yeah, I feel like letting a guy like King go, it kind of tells me that they're definitely still in rebuild mode. And I was going to mention too with like Stingley versus Gardner. Look, man, I mean the number one difference between the Houston Texans franchise and the New York Jets, the Jets have a good roster. And if anybody doesn't agree with that, they're just not looking at the team. To be frank, but I mean their roster is really, really good, particularly on their defense, man. I mean, we played them week 1. Was it last year?
Last year, yeah.
Week 1, yeah, week 1 last year. I mean, their defensive line is ridiculous. They got a lot of good guys on there, and they only added to it with Gardner, and their offense too. They're finally now they've got Rodgers. Like they've got so many pieces around, in the running back room, receiver room. Like that's a good team. And I think the Jets, they could have drafted Stingley or Gardner, and they probably would have been a good choice. I think it probably wouldn't have mattered for the Texans. I don't think that their roster is the same. They're definitely, year 1, year 2 into that rebuild. Whereas the Jets are probably like, 3-4 years in. So they're an ascending team.
Right. Which is also a better situation for a rookie cornerback, right? Let's be honest. Yeah, he had better players around him, so I think that's also another thing where it's kind of hard to grade Stingley. He's in a no-win situation. So
but I mean, he's got talent, and another guy that they also drafted the same class, Jalen Petrie. Also a pretty talented guy. I remember he was interesting. He was one of those kind of hybrid players. I think we were considering looking at him at corner, but he kind of projected to be like a, maybe a slot corner, maybe safety. If I recall, I think actually Jason, I remember him talking that Petrie would kind of be projected as a safety. Ended up being in that role. I believe now has their free safety starting spot locked down. So he's another guy. He's got some talent. Obviously, we liked him on film as well. So yeah, I mean, they've got guys who have talent. It really just comes down to just like, do they have enough of it to be able to handle all the weapons, and do they have the right coach in place to get these guys playing well, and to try and improve over what we saw last year. At the very least, I'll say Ryan's he's shown enough to me in San Francisco that I think he's going to be an upgrade over Lovie Smith. Lovie was a great coach, way back when. Had a lot of good seasons over in Chicago, but to be honest, his game is just dated. It just really is not cut out for the modern NFL. If I recall, I mean, when he was the head coach over in Tampa a couple of years ago, it's very similar. He kind of took over, and that defense just was not good at all. And then, end up getting Bruce Arians in there, and, a couple moves at Tom Brady, and they end up winning the Super Bowl. So, I don't think Lovie was the guy, even though he was a defensive-minded head coach. So, we'll see. But if I were a Texans fan, man, I wouldn't be too down. I'd be optimistic. I just want to see what we have, and hope that Ryans can get the best out of all these young players.
I think that takes us into our bold and score predictions. Fun to bring this back, update the spreadsheet, get it going again, and I'm curious what you guys are thinking for bold predictions. I think I have mine, but if anyone else wants to go first, feel free.
Let's first go back to last year and remember. How bold were we? How many bold predictions actually hit? I'm looking at this. It looks like Alec might have had 3, Chris had 1, and I had 0. So we went very bold last year. Very bold.
Yeah, supreme boldness.
Supreme boldness. Oh, man. Alex, bold prediction, week 1 last year. Dobbins has an explosive run of 50 yards, man.
Not quite.
That's amusing for so many reasons now. 1 year retrospect.
Yeah. Pepe, 1 INT for Peter, and then Chris had Marcus and Kyle 1 INT each. And I think Marcus had 2, right? Or do you have 1? So Marcus
He had
did
1.
something.
Marcus had 1. Kyle Hamilton did not. So
Yeah,
Chris
he's
almost
never had an
got it.
interception,
Almost.
which is crazy. He had that one on the that call back, but he'll get his interceptions this year.
Right. Yeah. If I recall, actually, Marcus almost had to, but I think he must have. I think he caught it out of bounds or something. But yeah, he was on a streak those first couple of games. Nevertheless, we didn't count it. But I'll go ahead and get us started. So we didn't talk much about this during the show here, just because of we're not sure what the Ravens what they're going to try and do. Are they going to lean more on the run game or maybe go to the pass game? But I'm going to say for me, I'm going to say Odell Beckham gets his first touchdown as a Raven. For me, it feels bold because I feel like I've talked about this on the show. Like Odell, I'm a little bit not as high on as some other people. Just not like a player I'm like super excited about. But that being said, like he really has seemed to kind of be the face of this wide receiver group, and I think the Ravens want to get him involved. And so I think that they'll try to get him involved early. So I'm going to say he gets his first touchdown.
Nice. I am also going to go with a touchdown prediction. And I'm going to go ultra bold here because there's a man we really love. We're really excited to see, Mr. Zay Flowers. And I'm going to go so bold as to say that Zay Flowers will catch Lamar's first touchdown pass of the 2023 season, and it'll be in this game.
Nice. Fun. I think that's plenty bold because there's a lot of great pass catchers that could, do that. So,
like Odell. Could be Odell.
Could be Odell. Could be Bateman. Could be Mark Andrews come back to practice tomorrow. Could be Likely. Could be anybody. So, Nelson. Lots of options. Dobbins. Ooh. All right. Here's my bold prediction. I'm going to flip it to the defensive side of the ball. I'm going to say not only does Clowney get a sack, but it's a little bit of a sack show. And I'm going to say Clowney gets a sack in a 4+ sack game.
You know what? We didn't really talk about him much, but I actually did want to bring him up after after your take about Will Anderson, Peter, because as much as the Texans want to try and recreate J.J. Watt, Will Anderson could also be a Jadeveon Clowney. And Clowney, he has longevity. He's been around a while, but he was not a first overall pick. So
He was not, no.
So, the Texans have a history of both. We'll see what happens. Obviously, Will Anderson's a very different player, but yeah, I'm with it. I'm with it now. The Clowney is on the Ravens. I'm with it if we want to get him a sack his first game.
I think that's like the part of the parlay that's going to bust me. If we're talking about betting here, like I wouldn't be surprised if we get 4 sacks and Clowney's not one of them. You get Travis Jones in the middle. That's why I made it. That was my bold part. I think 4 sacks is a little easy, not bold, mild, temperate.
Right. Yeah. Considering we spent 5 minutes talking about how beat up their offensive line is. And it was going to be really bold to say that the Ravens will get sacks on Sunday.
Yeah. No, but I think it's the Clowney part that's going to make it a little dicey. But anyways,
plus the player.
We'll go ahead now, and it's like the home run prediction. I never bet, like who's going to hit a home run tonight? I don't know. Somebody probably, but darn if I know. All right. For score prediction, like I mentioned, 10-point favorites, implied score of 27-17. And I guess for me, I'm going to say it's a little bit more than that for the Ravens. A little less than that for the Texans. I think the Texans score 6 points. I think the Ravens put up 30. So, bet the under.
I think the Ravens are going to pull away from this one too. 6 points seems a little low for me. My prediction is going to be 27-13 Ravens.
Nice. Yeah, I think we're all going to predict a Ravens win. It's not a shock. I think there will be very few people picking Texans. I think those people will be, I don't know who they'll be beyond insane Texans superfans who know nothing but optimism because their team's been a bit of a letdown the past few years. I do think that our secondary issues could make things a little dicey at times. And I think by the time the fourth quarter comes, I could see the Texans getting into a little bit of a groove and getting some cleanup, mop-up points. So I'm going to go 34-16 Ravens. Texans get 2 touchdowns, fail a 2-point conversion.
Well, excellent. Lots of fun. Hope that this game is good weather. That's another part we didn't really talk about. It's a little early in the week. It does have a little bit of a chance of rain. Hoping that's not the case. Hopefully it's nice, clear skies, okay temperature. Hopefully not burning. So that's gonna be that could be a thing early September on the sunny side of the stadium. So don't forget your sunscreen, y'all. And yeah, but it was definitely fun to preview this game. Have Chris back on the show. Beautiful thing. And we'll catch you next week with hopefully another Ravens win to start off the season 1-0. They love doing that. Have a big showing for the home crowd. You can find us on X at OneWinningPod, and you can find us on email, onewinningpod@gmail.com. And we'll talk to you next week. Go Ravens.